today for the VI Consortium for a gubernatorial candidate interview. We call them our big interviews, and today we're interviewing Mr. Kenneth Mapp, gubernatorial candidate, former lieutenant governor, and so much more. How are you feeling today?
Very good.
Very good.
Very excited. About 6 more days to go.
Yeah.
The reaction of the community has been overwhelming, warm and gracious, and really trusting a lot of responsibility and expectation on Mr. Pratt and I, and we look forward to finishing the next few days. I've sort of been admonishing my folks that we need to prepare for a runoff, and there's some debate about that, but being realistic, we're looking at that, and we're just excited. It's going to be a great time of opportunity, and if the community continues to support us and to give us what appears to be a successful effort, we are going to be able to work with the community and really do some very positive and powerful things for the people in the Virgin Islands. So excited.
You've been this close before in a gubernatorial race, and here you are.
Not quite sure I've been this close.
Okay, so you think...
But I've been in this church.
You've been in the sanctuary before.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
And
yes.
so you're more hopeful than ever that you're gonna. Well, you just said a runoff might take place.
Yes.
But in the end, you think you're gonna prevail.
I believe in the end, excuse me, in the end we will prevail. I believe, I am confident of that. And all things being equal, and many things are subject to change because we are not in control of what happens from day to day in a major way. But the way it's going and our message is resonating well, I think people are seeing that we have a plan to grow the economy. We have a plan to put our people back to work. We have a plan to deal with the high cost of energy. We have a plan to begin to lower the cost of living in the Virgin Islands. We have a plan to provide opportunity for our young people in training and technology. And we have a plan to invest in our infrastructure. And to the extent that other candidates spending a lot of money talking about the rightness or wrongness of our plan, at the end of the day, they're talking about our plan.
Right.
And so that's very positive.
Okay. We are in Frederickstead, of course. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it looks familiar.
Yeah. Tell us more about that.
Well, this represents part of phase 1 of the Frederickstead Economic Revitalization Project. And pretty much so, this is a project of Governor Charles Turnbull. I'm credited with being the brainchild of the project. When the cruise lines had announced that they were no longer making St. Croix a port of call, Governor Turnbull really wanted something done to help St. Croix's attractiveness and appeal. And while we worked and understood the Department of Tourism, clearly when you just walked to the arrival town of the cruise ship industry, the park and the waterfront was really in a state of massive disrepair. And rather than just get a bunch of architects and designers together and try to figure out how to fix it, I went to Governor Turnbull and presented an idea that I learned in public administration in terms of how to help drive community involvement, and it's called a charrette. And explained all what it was, and the governor was very interested and wanted to see this work. And we invited the entire community of St. Croix, whether they were taxi drivers, property owners, people living in the town or not, who had an interest in the town, to come and spend 1 week with us with advertising professionals, tourism professionals, park and open space professionals, and really sit down and try to have a good understanding of what is the flavor of Frederickstead. What do the residents feel about their town? What do they want to showcase about their town? We wanted people to look at Frederickstead as their home, and that you were going to make an investment in your home. Forget about the tourists for the moment. You were going to make an investment in your home, and what did you want your home to look like? And so we spent a week really going through the elements of the town. We took groups out and walked through the town and with historians of our history, and talked about the architecture and what the elements of the town. This is one of the 5 towns in the Caribbean that were planned. Now, there are only about 5 of them in the entire Caribbean.
Wow.
Christiansted and Frederickstead is 2 of the 5.
Wow. Planned.
And that were planned. And we just really went through it and sat with the community and folks like me got out of the way and people got to talk about how they were raised and how they lived and what the town used to do. And so that process developed this project. And of course, we looked at what was happening at the Vincent Mason Pool, and we looked at the softball fields and the Fort Frederick Beach, and we looked at Fort Frederick and the Butler Park, and really recognized that for a first phase, we couldn't take on everything, but that we would do a demonstration and get a good phase one done. And we brought the Port Authority to the table and got access to the port. You remember this was just a big swash of concrete.
I remember this project,
and really put it together. And the public made a lot of the decisions about the elements that you see in this project. And we took that direction and codified it to a plan of action, a blueprint, had it permitted, had it financed, and had it built.
And you're saying this is phase one?
It's only phase one.
Phase two would be what? What would that look like?
Phase two would be a massive undertaking. Phase two is this is the taste. This is the waterfront. And I want to point out something about this project as well. If you stand in the park and you look at all of the private properties on Strand Street, before this project was completed, all of them, or 90% of those properties, were all in a state of disrepair, needed renovations, and broken. And if you go down on the park now and look at them, 95% of them have been restored and renovated, and none with public dollars and none with any tax credits. But this is the ultimate demonstration that we teach in public administration and school of governments, that if the governments in communities really take care of their responsibility in the infrastructure, private capital will flow right behind it. But phase two is now a much bigger project. Phase two is not about a baseball stadium. It is about the total revamping of the town, meaning that we work also on the living spaces, the homes. We work on the entrance of the town. We work on the beach properties in the town. We take, St. Croix has the opportunity to be a driver in the Caribbean as its benchmark or niche in the tourism market in the Caribbean of sports tourism and heritage tourism. And because of the deep, rich history and culture on this island, that's something that many islands can't offer. Many islands don't have access to the deep, rich history of that particular island, and for many reasons, not saying that as a judgment. And also because of the topography of the island, it lends itself for tremendous diversity of sports. And whether you build school facilities and you build athletic facilities with it, whether you build them outside of a school setting, but you create an opportunity for folks to come and use and come to St. Croix and do a variety of different sports, and you expose our children to a more professional level of sports in a different variety of fields. Just as an example, Laverne Jones is a native who's a very successful track and field athlete, very successful. Number of where can Laverne Jones run in the Virgin Islands? There are no real facilities for that kind of activity. So just imagine we had a reconstructed and a completely rebuilt St. Croix Central High School. And not only did you build the school and the libraries and the computer technologies and everything, but you got so much land there that you put in a higher end rated from the International Track and Field Federation level of track and field facilities. And you went and you put in a soccer field. You had a swimming pool. You had a measure of competition to develop folks for being able to enter into competition, let's say at an Olympic class. Then folks begin to come and want to use those facilities and bring other athletes to the island because you have them. They're not all over the Caribbean.
Right.
And so you and I and most people in business, we don't care why someone comes to St. Croix and sleep in a hotel room and rent a car and eat in our restaurants and shop in our stores and help to grow our economy. But if we have the facilities that lend itself for groups to come in and partake in our community, then we expose our children to something that's very positive. Our facilities are being used and folks are investing in the economy.
So you spoke of rebuilding Central. Is that something you will undertake in your administration?
If I was given a chance, it would have been done back in 2006. As my partner and I have committed to the Virgin Islands, the people of the Virgin Islands, as part of our investment in our infrastructure, is to target 4 public schools and have them completely demolished and reconstructed. And Central High is one of those schools.
Within your first 4 years?
We give it an 8 to 10 year plan.
8 to 10
because
year plan.
part of the way we're going to finance that is we have a number of unexpended U.S. Department of Education grant monies. We have a number of grant funds available for schools at the Department of Interior and working with the delegate, we want to identify some additional sources of funding and really demonstrate the poor conditions of the physical plant of the school. Many of these schools are 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. They weren't built to become historic properties.
Right.
They're living in a bastion in the Caribbean with salt and the sun and been through several major hurricanes. And so we want to be able to target them for demolition and complete reconstruction. And some of them are just bad. We had one in St. Thomas, the Joseph Gomez Elementary School, where the walkway collapsed on some teachers and students, and one of the teachers had both of her femurs were broken in this process, and she's had several surgeries and have not even yet fully recovered. So fixing and patching and painting is not going to be adequate in a number of the school plans.
So, just talked about phase one of this project right here. Why aren't we seeing more cruise ships on St. Croix? Obviously, St. Thomas it's a hub for tourism. I think St. Croix has certain aspects of tourism, probably not in the same realm as St. Thomas. But why aren't we seeing more cruise ships docking right here in Frederickstead?
Well, there are a number of reasons I suspect for that, and that has to come to the appeal. And we want to be very clear that part of what we're doing in the Frederickstead Economic Revitalization Project is not about bringing cruise ships. It's about understanding how you can revitalize a town that you start with as your home, that drive businesses and investment, and then when people come to your shores, it becomes a very powerful place for people to gather and to enjoy. And there is a great appeal of what's been going on in Frederickstead when cruise ship passengers come. And from everything that we've seen from the Department of Tourism, there are going to be additional cruise ship calls. But we don't want to, and we made sure we did this when we were doing this project, we don't want to muddle the message to give people the impression that the reason we want to invest in Frederickstead is because we're doing it for the tourists. No, we're doing it for us who live here. If you really invest in your home and you make it wonderful and comfortable and nice, you can't wait to invite people to come to your home and socialize and show it off. And we want to get our community into this bastion of pride of their own home, of their own islands, of their own towns, and take ownership, take stock in it. There are people that come to this park and pick up trash and repair things and paint without any remuneration or payment from anyone, because they feel very connected to the project from its inception when they contributed to it, to seeing it built and caring for it. And we want to be able to do that with our whole towns. Just think that if you took the Lagoon Street complex and we took the folks that live there, and we worked with the Virgin Islands Housing Finance Authority, and we financed homes for these folks, for the folks that live there, whether it's a half an acre or a quarter acre of land, and gave them their own home. And then demolish that complex and build a governmental center that housed the Supreme Court and the legislature and human services and labor offices in Frederickstead. And then we bought additional land and we developed this stadium for softball and baseball, and really fixed the channel that comes down from LaGrange, what brings the water down that normally destroys the Fort Frederick beach, and put a channel there to bring that water out and really develop the beach. The kinds of investment and the kinds of opportunity where so many people in Frederickstead own property that they will be able to have, not to sell their land, but to either invest in a business, to lease their land out, but the activity that it would bring. And if you take not the Frederickstead footprint, but if you take the same model of behavior and you take it to Christiansted, and you decide that, we should be having homes on Queen Street, on Hill Street, and get people moving into the towns and driving activities. And then we looked at that same model of Charlotte Amalie with the Main Street redevelopment project, the $8 million project that's about to take off. We begin to change the dynamic of our island and our community, and we begin to revitalize our towns and our cities. And that's what this is all about. This is about how you get the community to take complete ownership of their towns and their cities, and to drive investment from the private sector in developing them and in growing them and expanding them. But what the government does is it takes care of its responsibility in the infrastructure.
So let's talk about the economy, and I guess that's what we've been speaking on for quite a while. But your specific plans as it relates to the Virgin Islands on a whole in uplifting the economy from where we are. We have a high unemployment rate. People are barely getting by. WAPA, all condensed into one situation, makes for very bad living for many Virgin Islanders. What is your plan to uplift this community?
The traditional plan in communities where private economic activity down is to drive dollars into the infrastructure. And we've spoken through this campaign about much of the opportunities just in terms of federal road monies, because of how bad we've done in getting federal road monies in the last number of years, and how much federal road monies are available. We've talked about how we need to get the cost of electricity down and to get the efficiency up by going into a multiple of smaller generating units that produce electricity, about continuing the diversification of how we produce electricity by bringing even some coal on the South Shore with some of the air quality permit ability that we have there since the closing of Avenza and the closing of the St. Croix Renaissance Park as an industrial activity, and how coal can bring further down the cost of electricity. And bringing that down, the opportunities it allows us to drive for e-commerce because of the broadband capacity that we have, second or trumped only by New York and New Jersey, nowhere else in this nation, and being able to induce and incentivize e-commerce entities to come because we can offer incentives on the federal tax obligations. And what that would do to our young people in terms of rescuing a generation of having jobs that are high paying, that have compensation like health insurance, 401k plans, vacation, and requires continuing education of our people. This is why we say, the research and technology park, as we knew it 20 years ago when it came in the legislature, was, I guess, a fabulous idea because that we were at the very, very front end of technology. But now technology is in your pocket. It's in my pocket. It's in the camera and the microphone that's there. It's in the back of this picture. It's all over. And so there's no single building that research companies or technology companies go in. Right. So now the $14 million research and technology
I think it was a waste of time.
Is empty at the University of Virgin Islands. Well, it ain't empty because it provides Oswald Potter and I a wonderful opportunity. And we've gone to Dr. Hall to talk about the University of the Virgin Islands taking on the responsibility of driving a high-end technology and vocational technical institute, vocational and technical institute. And the research and technology park, because it's empty and it's a wonderful, fabulous building, provides us an opportunity to use that facility. And given the dorms that are in the UVI campus, then gives us the ability to have young folks from St. Thomas and St. John to come over to be able to attend that institute and figure out how we have to pay the University of Virgin Islands for its services and staff, the technical institute, and make sure that it has the resources to do that. And we know federal education dollars can go a big way to do that. We can go to corporations that have an interest in us developing the skill set in the economy to drive people to be able to work, because folks don't understand. Some folks don't get it. When you bring somebody from the outside to work for you, it's an expensive venture. You got to find a place for them to live. Yeah. You got to find transportation. You generally got to find schools. And you got to hope the wife or the husband likes it, because if one of the spouses don't like it, that's a wasted investment, meaning that somebody's going to pack up and say, I can't do this anymore and I got to go back. And we need to nurture that skill set in our community and drive that into our economy to prepare our people for the future.
You've spoken about 1,000 jobs that will be created.
Yes.
That's caused quite a stir.
I thought it was something that was quite positive.
Well, yeah, but some people would say, okay, how is it possible that you immediately upon you entering office?
How did we figure that out?
How did you figure that out? 1,000
jobs.
That
goes to experience.
All right, so we want to hear it. How is it possible? How are you going to make it happen?
Sure. Osbert and I continue to ask agency heads to meet with them, and we want to meet with them not from a political perspective, but to understand what's going on in their agencies. What are they working on? What are they doing? We don't take the position that we know everything and that when we walk in, everybody will have to turn to us and we'll just give all these new directions, but to try to understand what's the good, what's working, what's functioning, what are some of the shortcomings in terms of resources. How are you able to deliver any modicum of public services or not? And one of the things we started learning very, very early on, and I got this from one of my friends, and this is a Virgin Islands thing.
All right.
We don't have 50 cents. We only have $1.50. and that's a crazy kind of math. And what does that mean? We have police officers working 2 and 3 shifts, double and triple shifts.
Right.
2, 3, and 4 days each and every week without consent, meaning without the employee doesn't have any say. They have to do it because we don't have enough bodies. And so we spend $12 to $14 million on overtime. Now, Osbert and I truly understand that we have to talk and address the issue of not competitive pay and the need to raise salaries in the public sector, particularly, on the front line. But we spend 12 to 14 million dollars each and every year in overtime. And so nobody is stopping to say, well, wait a minute, we're spending that kind of money in overtime because we don't have police officers. And a policeman's or policewoman's salary begins at 32,000. So if you add 10,000 of that for fringe benefits, or $40,000, and you took $10 million, does that get you 250
It does.
police officers?
It does.
And if you say I can't hire 250 police officers because they're just not there, but I can hire 200, or I can hire 150.
Right.
But I can go to Central High School. I can go to the educational complex. I can go to Ivana Yadurakan. I can go to Charlotte Amali High School, and I'll start a law enforcement cadet corps. And I'll give these cadets $3,000 a year. And I'll start training them in law enforcement and exposing them to law enforcement and paying for some courses for them at the University of Virginia in police science and administration. And bring them out in the summer and let them work side by police officers in traffic duties. Aren't I now billing talent that I don't have to end up in a place where I am so understaffed with police officers that people have to work almost 80 hours a week to protect the Virgin Islands community?
Agreed. Here's a question for you on that very matter.
Sure.
Some people would disagree. They would say that overtime in such a tough economy, it's very costly to live here, make a decent living here. That is what sustains me, that extra overtime money. Now you're taking it away from me.
No,
what
that
would you
overtime
say?
money will get you killed. I was a police officer.
You think it would get you killed?
It'll get you killed. It'll get you killed every time. And let me tell you why. That's a horrible way to pay someone a decent salary. Because I'm going to take a person, I'm going to double work them each and every week so they can make a decent salary. And then I'm going to send them in the street to thugs and hooligans that when the car shows up, they're firing bullets and shots at them. And I expect their instinct and their game to be top-notch so that they not only can protect themselves, they can protect people in this community. That's a horrible way to do it. The way you want to pay police officers and law enforcement officers in our community is you want to start with a base pay. And you want to say, if you go to UVI and you get 6 or 12 credits, I'll give you a 7% increase in your pay. If you go to a national academy, the FBI, Northwestern University, and you take courses and you get a certificate, I'll give you another 7 or 8% pay. If you go and you become a registered EMT so that I have you in the car and you can respond to accidents and begin to treatment, I'll give you a 5% increase in your pay. If you get a bachelor's degree, I'll give you a 20% increase in pay. Am I not motivating now officers to invest in their skill set and to be able to be more efficient on the street? You want me to tell you something? That's the kind of policeman I was, because that's what we did in the day that I was a police officer. We incentivized officers so that the base pay was a starting point. But if you decided to invest in your skill set and improve your capacity and become a better and more effective police officer, we got you paid. And we had folks in the police department that got a 35% increase above their base pay just by educational systems, just by investing in the system. So we don't want to believe that we should pay someone an adequate salary by making them work twice as long on the basis that they're going to get some reasonable pay and then put them on the front line in front of thugs and hooligans. That's just an inefficient way of doing it.
Understood. So you come in, you're going to provide those jobs, and immediately you would cut down that overtime.
Yes, you'll cut down that overtime, but there'll always be overtime.
There'll always be overtime.
There'll always be, because if you're a police officer, I was a police officer, by the way, in New York City and the Virgin Islands. I was police trainee in the 83rd Precinct for 3.5 years, and in the Virgin Islands Police Department for 7-8 years. You get assigned a case at 2 o'clock. Burglary, a robbery, and 3 o'clock comes, you're not allowed to walk away. You got to finish that case.
Of course.
You have to go to court. You got to go in and do your report. So there's going to be some level of overtime. But the point we're making is that you can't man the streets of this territory without bodies, and on the basis that let's take $40 million and divide it among 100 people because they're going to get some good money, and then kill them out and burn them out on the street, because that's not sustainable. That's not the way to go.
So that's the first 200 to 250 jobs.
That's correct.
We got 750 more.
Oh, that's very, very easy. There are 137 funded positions in the Department of Education of teachers, administrators, and professional staffs. We just simply don't have them. And on December 31st of this year, 2014, and this is from the Commission of Education, 410 teachers, administrators, and professional staff qualify for retirement. And the difference is, if they do not retire, given the changes to the government employees retirement system to ensure that the
Right.
system stays viable. When you reach retirement age in time and service and you don't retire, each year that you remain on staff, you suffer a 3% reduction in your retirement annuity. So the Commissioner of Education will tell you how many letters she's already received advising her that come December 31st, that's my last day on the job. I'm gone. So that we have to deal with that. The department, in its effort to try and recruit teachers, have gotten the Department of State to already allow it to access visas to recruit foreign teachers from all over the planet just to put bodies in the classroom. What's going on at UVI in terms of our educational curriculum with so many young people up there studying to become teachers? Shouldn't in the second, the third year, we should be there mentoring and asking and trying to give support services for tuition and internships in the school program, and in lieu of our contribution and help to those students, be able to ask them for time and grade, meaning that for each year that I help you with your tuition and your books and provide you with internships, you have to give me 2 or 3 years in the classrooms once you come out of school. Should we be bringing them in the school system to begin the mentorship so that our young people don't feel that the only opportunity they have is once I get my degree, the only thing I'm left to is the airport, get on a plane, go to Atlanta, Maryland, or New York, and then try to find a job.
One of the reasons, Lieutenant Mapp, is the pay here for teachers is very low.
Yes.
And you know, you've had teachers complaining for a very long time.
That's correct.
They can't go out and protest as per certain rules with the
Well, they
union.
can strike.
Well, you know,
They can strike.
They can strike, but
They can strike.
but
But
they-
if you build a talent, we have to address teachers' pay. But if you don't show any loyalty, if you don't try to get your own people to have an incentive to grow into your own society, to build your own society, because you have shut the door of complete opportunity away, what else are they left to do but to leave? Have you seen us try to mentor and to grow our
Understood.
talent in the Virgin Islands?
Right.
So that's another 557.
That's 557.
That's correct.
We're down to how much now?
I'm sorry?
How many more?
That's 800 and something right there.
Yes.
And now let's talk about correction officers.
Okay.
We need about 75 to 80 of them. And why do we need 75 to 80 of them? Look, go read the consent decree. The consent decree on the Bureau of Correction is very clear. Severely understaffed. More than 350 inmates at Golden Grove Correctional Facility. 5 to 7 pods of buildings that house these inmates. Just go pick up the consent decree information from the district court. 2 and 3 officers per shift. Overtime in the millions. Officers can't leave because who's coming to replace them? So why don't we now saying, listen, you can't be a correction officer and I'm sending you to the Virgin Islands Police Academy. The Virgin Islands Police Academy does not teach correction science. But what about going to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, who has already mastered the ability to teach correction science and enter into some kind of agreement with them? We have to pay them and bring them down to help train officers and recruit officers and to help make the job more viable and attractive. Pay hazardous duty pay. They're hazardous duty employment. Pay night differentials. Send them off to the mainland to do internships in some of the federal prisons so that you begin to develop a science and a profession that people can be proud in. People, they just don't want to have a job. I don't just want to say I'm a correction officer. I want to look like a correction officer. I want to speak like a correction officer. I want to act like a correction officer. I want to be respected as a correction officer. So immerse me in my profession. Teach me in my profession. Grow me in my profession. And then you get some system of loyalty. And we don't do any of that in the Virgin Islands. We just give an exam, we hire you, and we put you in the beast. And most people don't stay a year.
So you've
Have no interest in staying a year.
you've covered 1,000 jobs.
Not yet.
Not yet. Let's go.
Got 125 more to go.
Let's go.
Nurses,
Yeah.
EMTs. What is part of the problem at the Wang Lui Hospital with the pulling of the certification? A lack of nursing staffing and medical providing staffing, correct?
Right.
So if we want to keep our certification, aren't we going to have have medical staffing come into the Wang Lui Hospital?
Yeah.
Revenue officers, the director of the Bureau of Internal Revenue, the director of the Corporation and Trademarks Unit, the Commission of Licensing and of Consumer Affairs have all testified that this business of for every 2 employees that leave, you can only hire 1, and that's if we find the financing. So we don't even have the revenue agents in this territory to go out and collect the money that's owed to this government. And many of the positions I'm speaking to you about, They're funded. They're funded
I
in
was,
overtime.
I was about to ask you.
They're funded in over. You're paying the overtime
So the overtime is where you're going to get the money is to pay all this.
because you need the bodies.
You need the bodies.
That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
You do understand that some folk will oppose your overtime strategy.
That's correct.
Of taking.
That's correct.
Okay.
But what we will tell them and what we are saying to them is that there are other methods of dealing with incentive pay. If we work more efficiently at the government, if we collect the revenues that are due to us, if the government becomes more responsive to the services and the needs of this community, and we're able to grow the economy, we then can talk about reasonable and rational increases in pay. What we are saying is that we have 10 cents left, and don't pay the light bill. Let's just cut it up in something else. Don't buy food for the house. Let's just cut it up in something else. And what Osbert and I are saying is no. We have to work on a bigger check. We have to work on a bigger economy. We have to put more people back to work. One thing I was pleased to hear one of the opponents that are running in the gubernatorial race say, the one thing they can say if you are successful in hiring 1,000 people, and they said it publicly, it definitely will help the GRS because there are no new dollars coming into the GRS by new employees because we're not hiring any new employees.
Right.
But we're giving them the overtime. Another thing that we do that's irrational is that the shortage I spoke about in the education program. You know what are one of the fundamental ways that people will handle that? Let them retire and then put them all back on contract. Where is the opportunity for our young people? What are we telling them? Go. Go teach in some other school system. Go to some other city. We're not opening the door here for you to come in.
The Commissioner of Education said that they're leaving anyways because of better opportunity. You get $30,000, $42,000 here as a teacher. You get 60, 70, 80,000.
Depends on the city.
Depends on the city.
But
yeah,
yes, but I
again,
am constrained to believe that every young person in the Virgin Islands that grew here, that was born here, that lives here, are saying to us, I have no interest in working in the Virgin Islands because I can make 10 cents more or $10,000 more on the U.S. mainland. If you reduce the cost of living, if you provide good housing opportunity, if you grow the economy, then you make the quality of life better. And when you make the quality of life better in a community, people like to be home. People like to be among their family. It's not all driven by just the dollar. Why are you still here?
Right. Because it's home.
Why am I still here?
Because it's home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's not believe that simply because someone offers more money outside,
Right.
that all of us are simply going to get on a plane and go outside. I have been very fortunate. The people of the Virgin Islands have been extremely good to me. I'm humbled by it, tremendously so. And not only do I have and have gained tremendous experience in the public and the private sector, but I've been very successful in my educational pursuits. And folks will argue, if I want to get up tomorrow and go somewhere and make a six-figure salary, I could do that with my credentials. But I don't have any wish or urging to do that. This is my home. I'm here sucking salt when the times are bad, and I want to be here enjoying the apple juice when times are good.
Right.
And I think many, many people in the Virgin Islands, young folks, older folks, don't feel any different. I think we all feel the same way, but sometimes the conditions under which we're forced to live are so horrible that I'm left with no option but to leave.
Let's get this out of the way then. You've heard the ads on radio station talking about vindictive now. Let us talk
Let's talk about the ads, what generates the ads?
Let's talk about that.
Because
then.
let's be honest.
Yeah.
Let's just go to the meat.
Let's go.
Let's take the meat to the bone.
Right.
The president of the VI Restore Hope here on St. Croix, he's shopping for a pardon for his son. His son was a police officer who was on active duty, got in the car with an in-law who was a hoodlum, and if I remember correctly, actually out on bail for another murder. Went into a neighborhood and shot up a neighborhood and killed 2 young Virgin Islanders. These Virgin Islanders weren't hoodlums or thugs. These were 2 young men, one in particularly who had won a 4-year basketball scholarship at a university and was about to leave 3 or 4 days later. I respect the right that a parent would love their child. And the Virgin Islands community did nothing wrong to Mr. Brown and his family and his son. His son took an action. His son called death and consequences. And while he feels the need to pursue a pardon for his son and shop for pardon for his son, that don't make me have to party to that for any political basis or any political reason. I just refuse to be a part of anything like that. I suggest to that family, as I had suggested to his wife, who seems to IM me all the time, that have they spent any time giving any remorse or comfort to the family of those 2 young men? Have they even said sorry to these to the families of these young men? it's not, politics can get to the point where even the worst person has to be able to say enough is enough.
Right.
And I come from a family that taught me value and taught me integrity. I come from the field of law enforcement. And I have no qualms when it is time to say to someone, no, no. When something is unconscionable, it is unconscionable. I don't need to question the intent or the integrity of a person.
Okay.
But the entire morass driven from the Virgin Islands of VI Restore Hope on St. Croix is driven out of an intent to shop for a pardon. And I will not have a part of that. And if I am to be assailed and criticized for it, that's how this game is played.
Speaking of pardons, would you have pardoned Senator Alicia Chucky Hansen?
That's not a note on my desk. I was not the governor. The governor exercised his discretion, and he has to account and answer for that. I don't get to second guess that.
No, not second guessing.
I have no comment about it whatsoever.
Okay. All right, let's talk about GERS. I wanted to get on that.
Yes.
Soon it'll be insolvent.
No, it won't be insolvent.
You don't think so?
No, because we won't allow it to be insolvent.
Okay.
Because there are fixes.
Yeah.
It will be insolvent if we sit on our hands and do nothing.
Right.
What they say, fiddle and Rome will burn.
Right.
And that's what would happen to the government employees retirement system. The government employees retirement system is not unlike many other retirement systems in the nation. Ours are struggling under several very bad decisions. One, we create benefits for employees that we don't find the money to pay for. Two, we make loans to business entities and to people who cannot be financed and funded in a traditional market, and they come to us with a risk, and we buy into it, and then we're left holding the bag. But the short-off reality of the government employees retirement system is levels of reform, and some of the reforms have been enacted. For example, a defined benefit program. So the new employees that come into the system, based on what they put in, their contributions and their earnings, will determine what their retirement benefits are when they come out. An increase in the levels of service of non-vested retirees, and I have to make the distinction of vested versus non-vested, because the court is very clear that once a person is vested in a public retirement system, you cannot reduce their benefits. So the increasing age limitations for non-vested employees is another way that the system is being reformed. The issuance of private activity bonds, and they don't have to all be issued at any single time, but the legislature, for example, I think had appropriated $10 million annually of RUM revenues to the government employees retirement system. Rather than just give them that money and then they spend it, you take that money and you go and you float a level of private activity bonds, put that money into an investment instrument, and you have it where it can mature 10, 15, 20 years, and upon its maturity, it's made payable to the GRS to go against the unfunded liability. The second aspect that we have to deal with in GRS, and the more immediate, is that when employees retire, let's say the 410 employees that I spoke about from the Department of Education, the government hasn't given all of the required contributions that it's required to give on behalf of the employee.
Right.
And when those employees are ready to retire, the government employees retirement system will not give them access to their benefits unless they get that money. So what some employees have done is gone and gotten loans and given to the GRS to make up for the amount the government has not paid, and then when the government pays, then they give the money back to the employee. An employee shouldn't work 20, 30 years and have to find the money to put in that the government owes on their behalf. And how some systems have dealt with that also is through the front-end issuance of private activity bonds by coming up with a lump sum and paying up on what the outstanding balances of contributions owed to the employees are, and giving that to them so that they can access their retirement benefits. So we also have to look at the way we invest, the investment portfolio in terms of the return. And finally, I think what we need to do in the territory, we have a number of people that are very successful in managing multi-billion-dollar investment portfolios, and not just one or two in this territory. And I've asked a couple of them about their view of assisting the government employees retirement system from an advisory point of view, not a contract. And they've said to me, well, we don't mind helping. I don't mind helping. But the limits of liability for a director is only $1 million. I'm worth $600 million. I can't go sit on a board with a limit of liability of $1 million and just out of general, if something happened by the board, I could be sued and that liability is pierced, and now they're into my personal assets. So unless there's something done that to offer a greater degree of protection, I would be constrained. I give you advice, but I don't want to serve on the board. And so we look at that not only in either in a multiple of things of not only increasing the limits of liability, but also passing law that does some level of indemnification. I know this is wordy, but I want to point out that it made no difference if your limits of liability as a director was $2 billion. If your act can be described as as reckless and malicious, and there's harm to the entity, any level of indemnification or protection you have will be pierced. So we're not talking about having someone on the GRS board that can make malicious and reckless advice and the system suffer and we would be unable to recover. We're talking about the everyday general conduct and management of a business in terms of advice as a member of a board of directors, providing some realistic limits of protection.
Healthcare.
Yes.
We are not part of the affordable healthcare.
Whose fault is that?
Whose fault is it?
I was not on the Energy and Commerce Committee when that bill entered that committee chaired by Democrat Henry Waxman, and when that bill left the committee, the Virginians was on the outside of the gates. I was not a member of Congress, so it wasn't my fault.
It was,
but
yeah,
and we thank Congressman Charlie Rangel for really putting on a really spirited discussion in the committee about the exclusion of American citizens in the territories and some aspects of the Affordable Care Act being applied to citizens in the territories. And we really have to take advantage of that. You know, the Republicans are truly restrained in their arguments about Obamacare now.
Yeah, very much so.
Because what is the reality now is that
successful.
public and private sector employees across America are all experiencing reductions in their premium.
They love it.
And their premium health insurance premiums. Remember, ours just went up again.
Yes.
And folks who are uninsured and underinsured are now having full and unfettered access to quality health care.
Yes.
Part of our restraint, and you know, I keep hearing them arguing about this thing about how much Medicaid dollars that are to the territory. The Medicaid dollars is a result of not being able to enter a national or one of the 16 qualifying state exchanges.
Right.
And the Medicaid dollars apply to people of a certain level of income. So if
Very
you're
low.
in business, if you're working in the private sector, and you and your wife make a certain level of income,
it's impossible.
The Medicaid, all the Medicaid money is of no impact. But if the territory is able to enter into an exchange, then you're fully qualified.
Are we going to enter into exchange?
We have to.
That is part of the plan?
That we have to. And part of the obstacle of entering into the exchange is twofold. And actually it's onefold, but I'll give the two reasons.
Right.
One is that the Virgin Islands healthcare system doesn't have the technological platform to enter into an exchange, meaning that we are not fully integrated with e-records and e-systems across the health divide, hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, that all of the records are networked. You can't enter the exchange manually.
Right.
And so that's one of the barriers that we have to be able to solve. I remember in the Public Finance Authority back in 2004 and 5, when Dr. Cora Christian was bringing this issue to the table, and we were looking at the possibility of using proceeds from the tobacco settlement financing, the tobacco settlement fund that we were a part of how we could finance that to make sure that the Wang Louis Hospital, the Department of Health, and the Roy Lester Schneider Medical System, including Myra Keaton, would be able to be fully integrated and protect patients' rights to their records under the HIPAA statutes, but be fully integrated and then provide some level of cheap access to allow pharmacies and physicians and medical providers to be able to access patient records from an e-digital divide. Puerto Rico, who has mastered that for many years, were able to enter the national exchange, and companies in Puerto Rico and employees of those companies in Puerto Rico who live in the Virgin Islands will tell you that their health insurance premiums have gone down since Puerto Rico being a part, or Puerto Rico insurance industry being a part of the National Health Insurance Exchange.
It seems as a very complicated task, intricate task to get the Virgin Islands to where it needs to be as it relates to being part of that exchange or any exchange.
Well, it's a lot of work to be done in the Virgin Islands, and Oswald Potter and I recognize that we, the two of us by ourselves, aren't going to be able to accomplish any of this or most of this. But the leadership and the vision will allow it to happen, and the identifying of the skill set. And there you go, the young folks that we're sending out of the territory every day, being able to retain them and bring them in to help us to get these dynamics in place is going to help us get to a solution.
And you think how long, what is the projection on that as it relates to your administration getting us as a part of an exchange or whatever?
You let me see the books first.
Oh, you want to see the books first?
Because it would be horribly irresponsible to talk about by this date X will happen, and we haven't had that kind of in-depth assessment. When we talk about many of the solutions, they can happen because in talking with the agency heads and the folks that are involved, you see the pieces in place that you can go to achieve that. When you start wanting to say, well, we'll be in the exchange by X date,
right?
I will not
won't get into
say that.
No. Okay, just a few things here. WAPA, what is the grand plan for it? What do you intend to? You mentioned a while ago building some, making use of the South Shore.
A smaller diversification, it's continued diversification on how we produce electricity, using additional elements to produce electricity that are much cheaper than diesel, using some of the capacity of the air permit emissions capacity on the South Shore, and probably burning some coal, not going back to coal. But the United States, the largest producer of electricity in the United States remains coal, and the cost of electricity in the United States on average is 9 to 13
So you'd use some
cents.
coal here?
I would use some coal to help bring the cost down.
Okay.
Because before we can get to a full platform of renewable energy, we have to bring the cost down.
People think of coal and they think of pollution. What kind of coal are you talking about?
I'm talking about coal out of Virginia.
Right.
I'm talking about coal out of the ground of America. The largest single producer of electricity in the United States of America is coal. There's nothing used more than coal in America. When you go to the mainland, how much pollution do you see?
Right. No.
Because the technology on the scrubbings and pulling down the carbon emissions exists, that you can burn coal and not have those degradations on you. And when we had Hovensa here and it was operating, there was a level of what they call emission permits that you're allowed to utilize. Hovensa not producing and refining at full capacity gives us the ability to use some of those emission permits to put 1, 2, or 3, 5 to 7 megawatt generating units to help drive the cost of electricity down. We do not see it as a long-term or permanent solution, but we see it as a solution that will allow us to bring the cost of energy down, which brings the cost of living down, and which allows us to begin to grow the economy and create jobs.
Okay, a few more questions as it relates to, let's talk about, the last time we spoke on gay marriage, you said if a bill come up to your desk, you'd probably send it into law.
As long as it does not require anyone to perform any marriage. Today, in the traditional discussion of marriage, if I am a member of my church and I take a young lady to my minister and I say I want to marry this young lady, and the minister feels I'm just too cantankerous and not settled down and I can't get through the counseling, the minister has the right to say, I am marrying you.
Right.
And we're basically saying, as long as we don't impose on any church or any religion or detract or defract from any discipline of any church and religion, I have no problem with what two consenting adults want to do. I think the issues in the Virgin Islands are tremendously greater than the issuance of same-sex marriage and a recognition of same-sex marriage. And I think in our previous conversation, I said to you that where the courts are going, it's an issue that's going to be a fait accompli in any event. And we have seen the diminishing of the Defense of Marriage Act that was passed by the Congress being whittled away each and every month by the federal judicial system. And the question is, do we simply want the federal judiciary to simply deal with our marital laws in the territory, and I won't be sending any bill to the legislature, or do we want to have some framework in which the recognition of these marriages will take place?
So you and your administration won't be sending any same-sex marriage legislation?
No, that's not
we have
part
of
no
your
intent
agenda.
No, that's
Let's
not part
speak
of my
about
agenda.
marijuana. You got the decriminalization of it, the medicinal use, and recreational use of it. Would you sign a decriminalization bill into law?
Depending on how it was constructed, I could do that. I don't believe the Virgin Islands is ready for legalizing marijuana, but I don't believe that folks should be incarcerated for simple possession and use of marijuana. I think Again, the federal government, the Department of Justice, the Department of Treasury has opened up their regulations and have gotten to the point where now pot shops even have access to financial services, credit cards, banks, wire transfers, and to spend money, because that's what you do in government. When you say I'm going to impose this law and this behavior in a society, there's a cost to doing that. And so I don't personally have a problem with the decriminalization of or the permission of medicinal use of marijuana and having possession of small quantities of marijuana. There's this impression that if you do that, people will smoke. People who want to smoke, smoking.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I think we're about out of time here.
Thank you.
But I usually give every candidate a chance to make a case directly to the people of the Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
So thank you one more time. Much success with the campaign.
Thank you.
And
we ask you for your vote on November 4th for number 3, Ken Mapp for governor and Osbert Potter for lieutenant governor. We're about demonstrated experience, senior executive experience in the public sector. Yes, we have run businesses, and Osbert has owned businesses in the private sector, but we have done capital projects. We've created budgets and defended them. We've sat across the table from union leaders and worked with unionized government workers. We understand the issues in the government employees' retirement system. We've testified before the Congress and the Senate and the Federal Trade Commissions. We've worked on the issues of the economic development and capital projects in the infrastructure of the territory. And most importantly, Osbert and I care deeply for our home and care significantly for the conditions in which our people live, and we want to work and invest to get them out of the morass and the challenges, the deep personal challenges that many homes are struggling under in the Virgin Islands. And we ask you to begin by voting for us first on November 4th.
Thank you very much.